back to Babylon and Aleister Crowley and all this stuff. In your psychedelic journey, how do you see all of these different forces? How much of it do you see as just being complete rubbish, just something that people do to entertain themselves with, put on a show, put on airs? And how much do you really think does influence people for better or for worse?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a bit of like the I don't know, toilet paper coming out of the nose trickery when you're trying to describe things that are, you know, ethereal, immaterial, incorporeal, like indescribable, ineffable, right? So it's tricky territory, and also it's fraught with all kinds of various problems, cultural, social.
Mm.
The way, you know, things are sort of discussed in like kind of now age parlance is like, you know, expanded dimensional existences, right? So and those drugs reflect those kind of awareness. Like even high doses of THC can give you kind of a fifth dimensional
Definitely
condition. Ketamine, DMT, and then the mother of them all, Iowa, and so these are very real things too. They kind of augur, they mesh really well with virtual experiences. You kind of feel like you went to the cloud, especially on toad medicine. It's like you just plugged in and then you pull back out. It's like, I don't know, existence meets the Matrix meets, you know, smoking something. But and I you know, I have to see if it's a thing for you to look at, but it's you know, the history of art has always been kind of like exploration, experimental drugs, and then conclusions and normalizing, and then it's, you know, we go back to this feeling of experimentation and embrace that, and then they're like, yeah, we're producing crazy garbage, we're making a mess, but then, you know, these beautiful things pop up like mushrooms, and it's fantastic, it's amazing. Like you discover like a new piece of art that like opens up something, or you have an experience that changes your life. I mean, these are amazing things, and they probably just, you know, don't exist in the world's. If we're getting bored, we probably maxed out a type of thinking pattern that we already know too much about, you know, and we're not knocking on the next door yet, but we're kind of getting ready. And that boredom is actually like a precious moment. I think we're all feeling that right now. We're just like, okay, we, you know, don't have these other obligations, or we can just kick back a little bit more than we ever did. This is a really great time to get bored and then figure out, okay, so now, you know, it's talked about often that boredom is a really good basis from which to have an intense creative act, because we've allowed the mind to reset. I don't know, Gio, do you know who talks about this? I forget.
I think it's, you know, it's funny because I was watching this lecture by a radical ecologist. His name is Derek Jensen, and he was talking about how, and he writes a lot of books, and he said, you know, a lot of my life is just spent in quiet, doing nothing, just thinking, and just really not particularly being quote unquote productive. And I think as an artist, that is a great insight into how the mind works when it comes to the creative act, because you have to condition yourself. It's almost like yoga in a way. You know, why do you think all the stretches came about? Like, that's Western yoga, but that's not like real jhana yoga, because those exercises are just to condition your body to sit in long periods of meditation. And maybe perhaps the creation of art and art making is almost like that. So yeah.
Well, they also help your body to, from what I understand, have the Shakti move through it in different ways that it otherwise wouldn't. It basically helps make your entire being much more sensitive to whatever forces are coming up. But also, it's very important that yoga be paired, and all the yogis say this. It has to be paired with the was it yamas and niyamas? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but the idea here is that you would have to have, let's say, adopt a certain way of being towards other people. Obviously, you have to be a good person. You have to start helping other people. You have to be conscious of the things that you say to other people. And why I think this is important, to the point that Patrick, you were bringing up earlier, that these psychedelics are opening people up to another world. What my, let's say, concern here would be is that there's always another side of the coin. And if you are opening yourself up with the help of psychedelics to things that you have not trained your own body to undergo, my concern is that if we're talking about, we could call them just thought forms, like Carl Jung was talking about these various archetypes. I think it's possible, whether or not these exist in the formal sense, to call upon certain ways of being when you're in such an open state, that it's not always going to be sunshine and butterflies that are going to be coming out. Sometimes it's going to be things that, let's say, people in the more traditionalist Christian sphere of Twitter would consider to be demonic. And that is the kind of energy that I think that they are very concerned about when it comes to, people in power, dabbling in the occult, yada, yada, yada. But I just want to cement what I'm saying here and present it to you on a platter, and see what you think of it. What do you think about this negative aspect to this opening up for people who are not ready, and has it already affected our society in some way? And I would love to hear from Saturnalia and Geo as well about this.
These things are definitely not to be trifled with. At the same time, some of the mystical experience I've had have been through yoga and meditation, deep meditation, breathing techniques. These are ancient secrets. Like, you don't even need, your body can trigger these things. You can, the lungs are an amazing device for
Wim Hof method.
Yeah, for cleaning the body, energizing the body. Wim Hof is fantastic. And sometimes they're very weird. I did a Dr. Sagan breathing exercise from a YouTube video. It was 45 minutes, and I had an out-of-body experience. And I was like, had a vegetarian diet and drank water that day. So this was, I was pretty much by myself, right? I was working with a meditation group that we were hosting at the Art Space, and we tried over 100 different types of meditation. That was part of the fun. We had a different teacher each time. It wasn't about a guru. It was about plurality. It was about trying things. And this one was frankly scary. But so I wouldn't get into these things lightly. I think we stumbled upon it because we had already been through, the more general things. So so there are limits and there are boundaries, and people push them.
Well, let's say like this. In the Kabbalion, and I don't know how many people here have read the Kabbalion, they talk about this world being a mental world where your own thoughts would be able to change reality. I have no way of saying whether exactly this is true or not, but Patrick, do you subscribe to that kind of an idea, that at a certain level people are able to change reality based on their thoughts?
Well, they're able to change their reality because their filtering mechanism is constantly modulated by their mindfulness, right? You talked about like mindfulness and wellness; those things are coupled, right? They're kind of like a yin.
Mm-hmm. Well, Saturnalia, I'm curious what you think. Like, is it just people being able to change their reality, or could people change the reality that's around them to a certain extent?
Well, sometimes it certainly seems like you can change the outside reality. I mean, I obviously have no way of saying whether that's objectively true or not. I kind of wanted to get into the just the idea of like the psychedelic revolution, or like whether we're going to have another one of those like in the 60s, because you said that there's two sides to this coin, and I mean there's that Hunter S. Thompson quote about how the hippies found a meat hook behind a $2 tab of acid, not enlightenment. And so, I mean, if you look at like the psychedelic revolution in the 60s, it ended with Altamont and Charles Manson. It didn't end in like this.
It ended up in this. this is the effect of the 60s. They built this thing.
Oh, and
Yeah.
and also I'm gonna add
Not for
someone
that
For good or
idea.
for bad, yeah.
That's virtual reality.
someone did a really smart Twitter post where they said that the hippies who were taking LSD, now they're microdosing and they're creating all these advertising algorithms or
Oh
all
God,
these
no.
military-industrial complex weaponry. That's what they're engaging with. You know, not bringing about world peace, and that is kind of like a funny side of the coin, like you were talking about, Saturnalia. But I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, no, don't worry about it. But sorry, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, we were talking
But
about the other side of the coin,
yeah, yeah.
negative
So I
influences.
mean, I think that if you spend a lot of time online, you see there's been actually in the last 2, 3, maybe 5 years, there's been kind of like a harsh reaction against the use of psychedelic drugs, particularly among like Christian and like I don't want to say like right wing or reactionary communities, but you know what I mean, like highly online guys like that. And I mean, what's very interesting for me to notice is that psychedelics are not necessarily part of the counterculture. Like, if you go to a liberal arts college or even like I have a buddy who's at a tech college, all these like basically people who you would think of as like tech bros, yeah, they're all microdosing. They're all
Yeah.
smoking DMT. It's not a countercultural thing. It's a cultural thing. It's a,
So,
No,
so
but
so I'm not exactly sure where that's going to lead.
but to
I
add to
think
that, to add to that a bit. Oh, sorry to cut you off,
no,
Bev.
oh, don't worry about
Yeah. No, but to add to that, I think Patrick sort of brought up something that's very interesting to me, and I don't mean to like go full, SJW or whatever, but I think it's a valid point that when you bring in a lot of, for example, and the art world is dealing with this right now. Obviously, I mean, to some extent, it's like that's all you hear about. But when you factor in, for example, like post-colonial studies and thought, I think that some there's an aspect that do you want hipsters to go to the Amazon and do ayahuasca? To put it bluntly, I think that you have to have a sensitivity, even Timothy Leary said about set and setting. I think that there is a cultural ontology there that you have to respect in terms of these entheogens. And the art world, for example, is dealing with this. But yet at the same time, it seems that with the commodification of identity, that you have like, I hate to say like tokenism or whatever, but I think that there's certainly realities to that line of criticism that yes, we are better at dealing with these issues, but at the same time, it just seems that a lot of art that gets produced nowadays that's in tandem with the psychedelic reality, there seems to be a reification of not just identity, but to take and uproot these cultures and their ontological context and to say, okay, now we're going to put this in a gallery, or okay, now, we're going to commodify quote unquote drug tourism. Like there's a lot of these issues that are very sensitive. And the thing is in art, this is like ever present. This is like perennial. Like, I mean, this is like Gauguin, like painting, like nude indigenous women and stuff like that. Like there's all these issues of access. And I think that's the psychedelic thing. That's like another hyper extension of that because you're essentially taking these drugs that are meant for the rituals and the cultures of these indigenous peoples, and that's like there's so much thorny issues there. I mean, that's such. I mean, God, you could like talk for hours about that. Yeah.